This is Ryan Cantor, a writer for TigerNet and Shaking the Southland. In this video, we're going to be talking about Clemson's offense with new offensive coordinator Garrett Riley. To help us do that, we've got Conference Commandos, Cam, who runs the Twitter account Conference Commandos. He had a great thread about some of the issues with Clemson's offense last year. So now we're talking about, we brought him on to talk about what some of the biggest differences will be moving into next season. Thanks for joining us, Cam.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so one issue that I thought was, I think a lot of fans find really frustrating is at times Clemson seemed like they got no push up front or had no creativity in the run game. And at other times, it seems like they were doing great in the running game. You saw against Syracuse late in the game, they were able to basically abandon the pass completely and just run it down their throat and win the game.
Yep.
It seemed like that was going to be the recipe against South Carolina, and they wouldn't do it. And then against Tennessee, it seemed like they had a chance to do it, and they did it for a spell, and it worked, and then they get away from it. What do you expect out of the run? What do you think some of the biggest differences in the running game from last year, where it was okay, or at least sporadic, maybe sometimes good, sometimes not, to this year? And I'll put up some statistics from TCU while you do that.
Yeah, I think so. You touched on this. The Syracuse game was kind of weird because it was in the passing facet of the game, we really didn't attack matchups at all. But the run game, we did a pretty good job of that, just running down their throat. Because as good as Syracuse's defense was, especially in the back seven, they had pretty marginal size up front, especially in the interior. So we did a good job of attacking that. As far as as far as run push goes, I think Clemson was pretty average, especially kind of at the Power 5 level. I don't know, Pick Six previews. My friend Brett runs a good page on Twitter. He charts run push, and I think Clemson was around 27, 28. I don't know for sure. Among Power 5 teams.
Sure, they certainly weren't elite. They looked it against Syracuse, but that was perhaps the only time.
Yeah, and that was a pretty and you're right, that was a bad sample size just because that's one of the weakest fronts we played. Yeah, for sure. Kind of like you.
So yeah. Clemson ran a lot of inside zone, maybe some counter as well, but it seemed like a heavy dose of inside zone, not a ton of eye candy with it.
Right.
Do we expect that to be the same with Garrett Riley? Is there going to be more counter? What's really going to be different about the run game? We've talked a lot or heard a lot about how, they want to be, quote, violent. They want to run the ball. And, even though it's an air raid, it's a power air raid. There's all that, things that fans want to hear about how this team's not going to be a soft pass only team. But if you want to delve in a little deeper, what do you think some of the more mechanical differences will be between the run game from Streeter, Elliott to now Garrett Riley?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely reason to believe the run game will be a lot more improved. Garrett Riley's offense is definitely air raid, and that's kind of the connotation that comes with it. But like he runs the balls effective, or at least last year he ran the balls effectively as anyone, and a lot of it was counter. If you watch kind of the Lincoln Riley offense, he ran at OU and now USC. It's all just GT counter. The guard, the tackle pulling, or the guard and the tight end or the Y pulling. He does a lot of that. I think it was like 30-something% of his snaps.
So I watched a video of Garrett Riley giving a clinic back when he was at SMU. And a lot of the plays, including the screens, were tackles pulling all the way across and leading up the field, or at least a minimum guards pulling.
That's what I wanted to touch on. Yeah, for sure. You were ahead of me for sure. Yeah. So much of the counter staples or so much of the play action in the screen game, the quick game's all off counter, and even some zone running as well. It's all off of that. A lot of like quick receiver screens. I'd go as far to say almost half of the RPO game was just, pulling. So yeah, for sure. The offense, to some degree really revolved around those pulling guards and tackles.
Is that something that you think guys like Marcus Tate, maybe Walker Parks if he's at right guard again, or Putnam if he moves back there, is that something they can handle? Is that something that they will be taught? Maybe new methods to teach it and to get them better at that, or should that be a concern?
I don't think it should be a concern for Walker Parks. So he's got a really good frame. I think he's very fluid as far as linemen go. Marcus Tate, I haven't evaluated him as hard. Walker Parks, just because he has way more potential. But I think, as collectively as a unit, I think Clemson can handle it.
Okay. Let's talk about the passing game and maybe more specifically the option game. Clemson fans by now have learned a lot about the RPO, the run pass option. And I think what frustrated people going all the way back to 2020 with Travis Etienne, it feels like sometimes there's a lot of RPOs. You want to get in that case, Travis Etienne and now Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, who had the highest PFF grade on the entire offense. You want to get them the ball, and defenses obviously don't want your best players to get the ball, so that's the option they're choosing to defend. So then they open up the passing game, which if your receivers are struggling, you don't have a good quarterback, that's the much weaker threat. So it felt like the defenses, and I use the term dictated to the offense. We had a couple other guests on. And everyone seems to agree that Clemson won't get dictated to, but will kind of do what they want to do to the defense. Can you explain how that works differently compared to how we're used to now?
Yeah, so I like the point you were talking about, kind of about ball distribution, which was kind of something I talked about, or at least I tweeted about. That was Riley definitely emphasizes that as much as nearly anyone. I would actually go as far to say that Streeter emphasizes that even more. As far as ball distribution goes. The problem though was just guys like and Antonio Williams, who I could talk about for an hour, just how we don't deserve him. He was underutilized. Like all of his targets were just within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. So and it was kind of issues like that. It was just the lack of variance. Less so than guys getting touches. That's what I would say. I think Riley does a good job. They do run a lot of screen game, and the quick game is there. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, but I do think there's more variance in play calling there.
Gotcha. So maybe we'll wrap up with these two final questions. In the passing game, I'm going to pull these stats back up because there's one thing that I found especially interesting. TCU is better in everything except third down conversion percentage, where Clemson was like a good bit better.
Yeah, that is surprising.
What do you make of that?
I don't really know. I think I feel like Clemson was probably in a lot more third and shorts, just because. And this is just a guess. I think Clemson was in a lot more, third and manageables, just because TCU, did go downfield more. I'm not sure if that's
yeah,
really
that was exactly my hypothesis as well. So with that, do you think would you say Garrett Riley's offense would be more aggressive, daring, risky? Because the interesting thing is, if that's all true, they still had less turnovers.
Yeah, I think also think Riley definitely took more risks, but I think they were a lot more calculated. I also think they Clemson faced, and this sounds weird superficially because the Big 12 has been known for a lack of defense, but they've actually had some really good defenses over the last few years. The Big 12 fronts last year were way better than the ACC's. In the ACC it was really Clemson, Florida State. Pitt had a decent front. Other than that, so I don't know if that has anything to do with the third down conversion percentage, but yeah, we'll see.
Gotcha. So last question here. What do you think, or I should say, who do you think has an opportunity to be a particularly big breakout player for Clemson this year? I know you mentioned Antonio Williams. I don't know if you think he's going to be like a 1,000-yard receiver, or if there's anyone else more under the radar that you think will break out and be a good fit in this offense.
Yeah, it's always hard to gauge. I think Antonio Williams would definitely be like the best receiving threat. I think Jake Briningstool would probably be that guy. I think schematically he fits in really well with what Riley wants to do. Jared Wiley was the guy at TCU. He was just this giant tight end. He was like 6'7", 250, something like that. He used him on a lot of those pulling counter schemes we talked about. He also used him a ton in the RPO game. They ran a lot of like RPO slides, which would just be, kind of like an inside zone and a tight end, little like, line across the middle type route.
Sure.
I think Briningstool could be used on a lot of that. I think one thing that we didn't really do well with Davis Allen and a little bit with Briningstool, but namely Davis Allen, was we didn't line him up kind of as a receiver out wide or motion him out much trying to draw matchups. We did it a little bit against Miami, was the only game I really noticed it. And then it just kind of disappeared. I think that could be something Riley could really do as far as trying to. I don't know. I just think Brittany Stool's got so much potential, and I think he'd be the easiest to try to like draw matchups because I think that's what Riley really wants to do is just exploit matchups.
Gotcha. Well, hey, thanks for joining us, folks. If you enjoyed this, be sure to follow Conference Commandos. That's CONF Commandos on Twitter. Thanks for joining us, Sam. Appreciate it.
Go Tigers.